John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back. Before we get into the episode, just want to let you know that this is the free version of the podcast, and all that means is that we are way behind where I'm at in Patreon. So if you are loving this podcast and you need more John Constantine in your life, definitely go check us out at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books and sign up for the Hellblazer tier, where you'll get access to the entire Hellblazer library that I've recorded so far. And also you get access to the exclusive episodes of the Planes, Trains, and Comic Books main podcast. So if any of that sounds good to you, definitely go over to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, and sign up there. And with that out of the way, let's get into the issue. Today we are reading Hellblazer number 30, and just a little catch up on what's been going on. John has set a trap, finally. He's been tracking down this serial killer named the Family Man, and unbeknownst to him, at least until recently, the Family Man is one step ahead of John. So the Family Man went around and actually killed John's father once he figured out who John Constantine was, and now the two are kind of aware of each other's presence, but they're thinking they each have the one-up on the other. So John has set a trap where he knew the Family Man was listening in a window of a woman he was sleeping with, and he told the woman that he will be waking up at 6 a.m. sharp. And that was because he knew the Family Man would be listening in and think that John was going to be asleep until 6, so he was going to try to sneak in and kill him. But John is going to wake up early at 5, and he has bought a gun, so he's going to be ready for the Family Man when he comes to kill him. And first things first, we got the cover here. We see John is on the cover with his back turned. He's got his trench coat. He has a revolver in his hands, and we see an old man, presumably the Family Man, is on the ground writhing in pain, or potentially even dead already and just kind of frozen in rigor mortis. And we see that this issue was written by Jamie Delano with art by Ron Tyner and Mark Buckingham. And we start off on the first page with the Family Man. He is preparing for his inevitable kill of John Constantine. He hasn't slept all night, it seems, and he's just been getting himself pumped up, like lifting weights, doing like calisthenics in his room, and he's currently doing a bunch of sit-ups where he's already at 99. And while he's doing that, we see someone knock on the door and says, "Your morning wake-up call, sir. It's 5 o'clock. And then the Family Man asks the person knocking on the door to please call him a taxi. Then we cut to John Constantine, who is also breathing heavy and seemingly doing some kind of exercise, but then the panels kind of pull back and we see that it's actually him having sex with Nora, the woman he was staying with, who is Chaz, his best friend's cousin, I believe. And as John finishes, she says, "Christ, John, you needed that, didn't you?" And John says, "Yeah, thanks, Norma." And then he looks at the clock and he's like, "Shit, it's already 5 o'clock. So he was like waiting all night and he was like thinking he was going to get the one up on the Family Man, but he's already starting his plan late. So he starts to get dressed and get ready for his plan, which I guess is just to get outside of this house and wait for the Family Man to come try to kill him. And then he's going to walk up behind him with a gun and shoot the Family Man. So as he's getting dressed, he tells Norma, like, don't answer the door for anybody but me. And make sure, just keep everything locked. And then as John's walking out of the back door, he says, "Thanks again, love. You're pure gold." And then she's like, "Yeah? John?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry about that. It was 50, wasn't it?" And she was like, "No, it was 100. Because if you remember, she is a prostitute. And originally John was just going to pay her to stay there and not have sex with him. But that changed. So she definitely earned her 100. So he does pay her. And then he walks out the door out the back. And he goes around to some train tracks that like curve back around to the front, but they're on a higher level than the street. So he has kind of like an above view of where this guy is going to come from. And as he's walking up there, he's kind of psyching himself out. He starts singing at first, and then he's like, "Knock it off, Constantine. You can't play the fool here. You're not crazy, and this is not a dream. It's real. You're doing it, and it's sheer bloody murder." And at the word bloody murder, we see the Family Man is pulling up in his taxi on the lower street. And the taxi driver who drove the family man is also saying bloody murder because I guess the family man was being cheap and only paid $20, which I guess was the base fare, and there was no tip in it. So because the driver was getting mouthy, the family man begins to kind of like get aggressive with them. But then the family man calms himself down and is like, no, we got to save it for John. We definitely want to kill him, and we don't want to like waste our energy on this guy. So he lets that driver go. And he proceeds to get a good lookout point, like through some bushes where he can see the front door and kind of like get himself situated to start his plan. And as he's doing that, we're getting the POV shot of Constantine pointing a gun at the family man at the lower level. And we're getting the narration where he's saying, but it shouldn't be this easy. Life's supposed to be sacred. You can't just end it like a sentence. You're human. You should feel something. Christ, what's wrong with me? My hand's not even shaking. Nothing's wrong with you. This is his way. Do it. Do it now. So basically, he's like having a back and forth inside of himself. He knows that this guy's bad, but he himself is not a murderer, at least like a cold-blooded murderer. So he keeps trying to psych himself up to do it. And so the narration continues. Look at him. He killed your father and all those others. Now he's waiting to kill you. He chose murder. Now give it to him. And then we see his finger on the trigger, and it looks like he's about to aim. And then his conscience gets in the way and he can't do it. And the narration says, but the frozen moment thaws into a nervous sweat. I can't. I might miss. I might get caught. And I need to see his face, to hear his voice, to know what he is. I need it to be more personal. I need him to know that it was me, John Constantine, who chose to live with his death. And in the panels with that narration, he's running back to the back of the house, and then we cut back to the front of the house where the family man is waiting in the bushes, and he's saying like, bus from Victoria at 7, 40 minutes to walk, 20 minutes on the tube. If he's not out by 1:30, I'll assume he's called a cab. But just as he's thinking that, John actually walks out the front door, so it seems like he's changed his plans. He's deciding it's going to be closer, it's going to be more personal. I'm going to lure the family man somewhere else. So he exits Norma's flat, and he proceeds to walk down the street, knowing that the family man is following him. And he takes the family man all the way into a construction yard. And the whole time we're following John from the family man's point of view, we're getting his thoughts. And he's talking about how exciting it will be. He can't wait until John finds out about his dad. And he's like, does he even know about his father yet? And then he's thinking about the funeral. And he even thinks about maybe waiting to kill John until the funeral, because that would be like funny to him. So as he's following John, he sees John walk into the construction site. And this is a big red flag to him. He's looking at the map and he says, wait, this isn't the best way to the tube. Oh, you nice bastard. You do know how to play. At last, an enemy. A boy after my own heart. And he says that last line out loud, but it seems like John doesn't hear him. And then the family man pauses and thinks for a second, and he goes, he knows, he wants it. He's asking to be followed. Scared. Walks like he shit himself. What's he thinking? And then the family man looks around and sees like different construction materials and thinks about killing John with those things. He's like, oh, a scaffold pulled to the skull, or push him into a hole and stone him with bricks, and other methods of killing in a construction site like that. And then he thinks about it and he goes, no, I wasn't born yesterday. And then he turns back to Constantine and says, don't miss the bus, son. But Constantine doesn't hear that. John actually thinks the old man is still following him, but he doesn't know where. He's thinking the man could ambush him at any point in time. And then he's trying to be quiet and stuff, but he's like walking through areas where there's pigeons and they're flying up. And basically he's just not very stealthy or good at this whole killing thing. Then he realizes that the old man is not anywhere around him. And he's like, Christ, what is he? Some kind of bloody ninja? I've blown it. Lost the edge. Can't shoot him if I can't bloody see him. He could come from anywhere. So realizing that the family man is nowhere to be found, John just continues to go back to his dad's house where the family man was kind of expecting him to go in the first place. So he rides on the train and he's constantly talking about how the gun is so awkward and weird. It feels odd in his coat and it's always hitting against his leg as he walks. And he just doesn't like guns in general. And then when he's on the train, he lights a cigarette, and it is a no smoking area, I guess, at this time in London. And there's an old man on the train who like touches him, and Constantine's like, what the hell? You know, because he's expecting to be killed by an old man soon. And the old man just kind of threatens to call the police if he doesn't put that out. And the old man even tells John, hey, Those will kill you, you know. And John says, I should be so lucky, which is actually funny because that's kind of a callback to what happens in the Garth Ennis run a little bit later on in the series. So John's train finally arrives at the Victoria Underground station, where I guess that's where he was going to get off to go to his dad's house. And we see a suspicious looking man. He has a hat and a trench coat on. We don't get like a clear look of his face, but he definitely stands out in the art, just like they make him more fleshed out and like a different color than everybody else. So he's walking into the restroom of this train station, and that's as John is coming up from the underground. And as John walks through the main lobby, we see a different man, but has very similar clothes on. But this man has glasses and a beard, so that is different than the other one. But this new man begins to follow John. And even though John can't see the family man, he knows he must be following me. So he's kind of taking precautions. He gets on a bus, and then he gives some football fans some money to buy some booze and bring it on the bus with them. So he's kind of like befriending himself with some street toughs, I guess you'd call them. And as John gets on with his new friends, we see the man in glasses and a beard also get on the bus. So the bus drives around for some time until one of its tires pops and it gets a flat tire, and then it has to pull over, and they basically kick everybody off while that's being changed. So John decides to walk off on his own, not because he's preparing a trap or anything, but because he has to take a piss. He's drinking too much with his football buddies, so he, instead of waiting for the restroom because there's a long line, he just goes on the other side of the bus to take a piss, and as he's peeing, the man with the glasses and the beard walks out around the corner and proceeds to pull out a very long knife. And at first, John is just like, oh, sorry, is this your truck? Because he's pissing on someone's car. And then he realizes that the guy has a knife, and he's like, oh, fuck. And then the family man swings at his head with this really long knife, and it cuts John's forehead open. And John is actually able to get in close and kind of wrestle with him and avoid the knife more. So he grabs the beard, and of course it comes off, and we find out that this bearded man is, of course, the family man that has tracked down John. So after pulling off the disguise, John is able to run away, and he runs down an embankment and into like a drainage ditch. And even though he does not like the gun, he does have it on him still, so he pulls it out. And the family man stops chasing him, and they have kind of a standoff for a second where they're talking to each other. And the family man says, a gun, is it? Well, that's not very British. Are you going to shoot me? And he can see that John is not very comfortable with the gun and possibly might not even know how to shoot it. So he says, no, you can't do it, can you? I'm an old man. You can't kill me. You're a virgin. I remind you of... And before the old man can finish the sentence, which I'm assuming he was going to say, your dad, John says, yes, I can. And he shoots, and the bullet just kind of grazes the old man's head. And it doesn't seem life-threatening, but the injury does disorient the family man, and he begins to have flashbacks of his childhood. So the first one we see is a memory of his dad burying the family dog. And I guess the dad was doing that after he had to put the family dog to sleep himself. So basically he killed the dog, and the family man, as a boy, so the son, is saying, Father, how could you do it? You're evil. And the dad says, look, boy, I know you love the dog. I love the dog. We all did, but it was in pain and misery. We're superior beings, and that gives us responsibility. It was a kindness. I couldn't stand to see it suffer. Could you? Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. That's what it's like to be a man. And then the flashback stops, and the family man says, if at first you don't succeed, and he holds his head in his hand to try to like stop the bleeding from the bullets, and he rushes John again. And during this attack, we get some dialogue between him and John where basically he thought John was kind of like him, kind of waiting to kill this old man, and like it was like a cat and mouse kind of thing for him. But he realizes that John doesn't want to kill him. He asks John, can you taste it yet? The sweet salt in the back of your throat? No? How sad. I thought at first, but I was wrong. You'll never understand how it feels. And as he attacks, John gets off one more shot, but it doesn't look like he actually hits the old man. And the family man actually misses John with the knife as well. Then the family man has another flashback where we see maybe it's a couple weeks after the dog was buried, and the dad is talking to the mom, and they're getting ready to go out for a late night, and they're going to leave the boy there, and the boy is saying, don't leave me. I can't stay here by myself. And then the dad was like, you were fine last week. What happened? And then he's like, but Samson was here before. And the dad says, "Oh, for Christ's sake, son, you've got to stop moping about that bloody dog." And now we see that the family man has cornered John against a wall. John doesn't really have anywhere else to go. As the family man lunges at John with his knife, we continue the flashback where the mom is saying, "Oh, Sammy, I know you miss him. It was a terrible shock to us all, but you'll get over it. We'll be back by 12 at the latest. I promise. Cross my heart and hope to die." And as the family man makes what he thinks is going to be his killing swipe with his knife, John actually is able to shoot the man in the chest at the very last second, and the knife misses John's head. And then we continue that flashback from before, and it is now well past midnight, and the little boy who will become the family man is waiting up, and his parents finally come home at 4 o'clock in the morning. And as he's about to go to them, he hears them say, "He'll be back at boarding school soon. That'll be a relief." So it seems like his parents are pretty eager to get him back into school and out of the house. And we get some narration from his point of view as he's kind of curled up with that hammer and a toy soldier in his hands. And the narration says, "Ha, too late for relief. In his mind, they were dead and buried hours ago. Since 12 o'clock, he's mourned their loss and accepted a future without them. He can never suffer that agony again." So I guess they made it seem like earlier on it was like his mom was a prostitute or something. But I guess it's just the fact that they were late and he did not like that. And he had waited up for them. And that made him snap and get a hammer and murder his mother and father. So as the old man is there dying because he's gut shot, he looks at John and he says, "End it now. It's a kindness. Take away the pain and misery. It's true. The past flashes before your eyes." And John grabs him by the collar and lifts him up and says, "God damn you, tell me why. Why did you kill them all? I must know why." And the family man responds, "I told you, you have to kill me to find out." And John drops him to the ground and says, "I can't." And there's a bit of a weird panel where I'm not sure if they messed up the coloring here, because we see John's gun and it looks like it's backwards in his hands. And I'm not sure if they were trying to show that John is putting the gun up to the family man's head or something, and the family man's reaching out around the gun, so it looks like it's backwards in someone's hands, but the coat is the wrong color. It's John's color, as opposed to gray, which is what the family man was wearing. But the family man says, "Do it. Finish it now. I don't want to see the rest." And as he says, "It hurts too much," John does, in fact, point the gun at the man's head and fires. And he's got like a crazy look on his face of anguish, and like he really, really didn't want to do that. And as John lets it soak in exactly what happened, he just killed a man. He says to himself in the narration, "How should you feel when you've just killed a man?" And then he goes over to a fence and he begins to vomit, and he looks out into a pasture of cows that is around the area where he was in the drainage ditch. And his narration continues, "Christ, it must mean something in the scheme of things. The traffic should stop at least. There should be some comment, not just the silent accusation of black-eyed cows. I want to make it tidy, to tell someone, to confess, excuse myself. But there's no excuse for murder ever, is there?" And then he just pulls the family man's body out from, I guess he shot him against a wall under like a bridge. So he pulls the family man's body out from there and then brings him out into the field where the cows are. And then I guess there's like a hill. So he kicks the body down the hill and lets it roll down. And then he pulls the family man's business card out of his pocket and he throws it down to where the body is. And he narrates, "Think of all the children you stopped him killing, all the mothers. But I can't. They're imaginary and this is real. This corpse, this field, this fog, this rain. This mark of Cain, this murder. Executioners are always volunteers. They do it because they want to." And then John walks away through the field, and as he gets kind of far away, he looks back and he sees all the cows are congregating around the body of the family man, and he says, "It is true." And then we get a narration box that says, "An old German woman once told me that if you lie down in a field, cows will come and lick your feet. Seems they're terrified, but they just have to know." And then, so apparently that's what's going on. The cows have gathered around the family man, and they're beginning to lick the feet of the dead body. And then John sits down and begins to smoke. And the last words of this comic are narration of him saying, Futile old world, isn't it? And that is the end of the Family Man story arc. I am not sure about the next story arc, but we are getting close to the end of the Jamie Delano run. He did the first 40 issues of this book, and then Garth Ennis took over. And that run is actually what a lot of the movie is based on. And it's also considered one of the best runs in the whole 300 issues of Hellblazer. So if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And we will see y'all on the next one.